depending on where you are in the country. Welcome to the first in a series of webinars in which we're going to include LELs as panelists. My name is Sheldon Greenberg. Everybody calls me Shelley. I'm Professor Emeritus at Johns Hopkins University, where I headed the Division of Public Safety Leadership for a couple of decades. And I'm a senior associate faculty in the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Hopkins. I'm former associate director at the Police Executive Research Forum and former officer with the Howard County, Maryland Police Department. It's an honor to be here. I'll be one of the moderators this afternoon. As we've cited in previous webinars, if you've joined us, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, law enforcement is changing. None of us knows what it will look like in the next 3 to 5 years. Increasing demands for service, calls to advance equity, the shortage of personnel, the loss of experience, instances of excessive force are among just some of the issues that law enforcement in the United States is facing, as well as our colleagues around the world. The amount of focus that police agencies give to traffic enforcement is changing as well. What is not changing is the urgency of our road safety problem. The number of people killed is at a 20-year high. And as you know, most of these deaths involve driver behavior. Johns Hopkins and its partners, and they include Florida State University, the National Criminal Justice Training Center, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and the Governor's Highway Safety Association, are working with NHTSA to identify ways to strengthen traffic enforcement in this changing environment. Our efforts will include recommendations for the next generation of enforcement tactics to deal with the persisting problems of speed, seatbelt use, and impaired driving particularly. We're looking at the LEL program also to identify how it could be expanded, build on its strengths, to lead and support improved traffic enforcement in small, medium, large, and tribal agencies across the U.S. As we consider approaches for enhancing the LEL program, we wanted to get the perspective of experts with a broad scope of experience to comment on how LELs have been able to improve traffic enforcement in their current roles, and how the effectiveness of LELs might be expanded if future new resources were available for training and outreach and other activities. Today, we're fortunate to be able to hear from 3 LEL experts who many of you are familiar with. Janice Martinez, who's a current LEL in the state of Florida and one of the current team of LEL instructors. Katie Alexander, an LEL in the state of Texas and another of our LEL instructors. And Glenn Cramer, formerly the regional LEL for the NHTSA Region 10 office. Each of them will introduce themselves better than I just did in just a few moments. And they'll describe their LEL experience. Then we'll start the conversation on the influence of LELs on traffic enforcement. Their insight and experience in outreach to traffic enforcement, along with your input, will be invaluable as we take recommendations about the LEL program, recommendations that we hope can lift the profession towards full potential to NHTSA. Of course, and this is really important, as you know, the LEL profession is not under a single authority. We're focused on making recommendations to be considered by NHTSA, as well as others, states, associations, and others. At this point, we're collecting ideas, we're collecting your thoughts. We're holding this webinar series with LEL panelists to gain those thoughts, not to dictate definite plans to states. But all plans, all good recommendations begin with ideas. and we need yours, the perspectives of our panelists, and the input from the audience. As time permits, today we'll allow for questions from the audience and try and get to them. The time is tight, and again, this is the first of a series of webinars. We're not going to try and accomplish everything that needs to be accomplished in the next 90 minutes. Let me start with my colleague, co-moderator, and an important introduction. I have the pleasure to introduce Daryl Stevens, who will lead the questioning and the discussion. Daryl's truly one of the nation's top law enforcement leaders, has been for some time. He's currently co-director of the Policing, Security Technology, and Private Security Research and Policy Institute at Florida State University. The Institute, as I mentioned, is a partner in this project. Daryl is retired chief of police of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. He served as chief and city manager in St. Petersburg, Florida, and chief in Newport News in Virginia, and Largo, Florida as well. He served as executive director of the Major Cities Chiefs Association and executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum, where I had the pleasure of working for him for 7 years. He's also served on full-time faculty at Johns Hopkins University. But truly, more important than his titles is his incredible accomplishments and the sphere of influence he's had in advancing law enforcement. He's the go-to person for many chiefs of police and sheriffs across the country. It's an honor to turn the program over to Daryl.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Shelley. I'm delighted to be a part of this partnership with Johns Hopkins and our other partners in this important work that we're doing on behalf of NHTSA, that hopefully the outcome will be fewer lives lost and much fewer injuries with people driving on our roads across the country. We've got a number of questions that we'll be asking. And as there's a question and answer tab down at the bottom of your screen. So as our panelists are talking, or as we're talking, if a question comes to mind, go ahead and put that in, and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can with the time available. But first, we want to start with asking our panelists to provide a little bit more background to you. And Janice, we'll start with you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Janice Martinez. I am a law enforcement liaison here in the great state of Florida. My area that I cover is Southwest Florida, which is basically Tampa Bay all the way south down to Marco Island. So I have a beautiful region in the state. I got my start very young as a state trooper here in Florida. My background was traffic homicide with a specialty in DUI enforcement. So as I transitioned from the Florida Highway Patrol as a state trooper into the LEL, it was really a very easy transition. It was where my background and my passion for traffic safety met my resume, and it was just a round peg in a round hole for me. I've been fortunate enough to help mold and shape the LEL program over the past 9 years, and I'm very excited to partner with Johns Hopkins and National Highway Traffic Safety as this evolving role of the LEL seems to be never ending, and the future of the LEL program and what we can partner to make it better.
Thank you, Janice. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Alexander. I am from the greater state of Texas, as Janice put it the last time we were in class together. I am honored to be here today, and want to reiterate that we are all here to get ideas, just like the LEL program itself. We learn from each other, we take from each other, and so my background, over 20 years in law enforcement, been an LEL for almost a decade already, and truly enjoy my job, enjoy traffic safety. Enjoy spreading our message and learning as much as we possibly can to share that message with everyone else. So happy to be here today.
Thanks, Katie. Glenn?
Thank you, Daryl. And again, this is a privilege to be invited to participate in your webinar. Thank you again, Daryl, and thank you, Shelley. And I am flattered to be with Janice and Katie. I've attended their law enforcement liaison development class and just was very impressed with the quality of the content. My background, I'm a retired deputy chief from the Washington State Patrol, and I represented the NHTSA Region 10, the Pacific Northwest, as their LEL. I've also worked with several states in doing assessments of traffic safety programs. And many of you that are on the webinar here today, I've worked with, and I've always admired your talent and the quality of your character, and looking forward to hearing some questions from you, because that's how we learn. And thank you again, and look forward to the webinar.
Thanks, Glenn. So we're going to move right into the conversation, and Glenn, we'll just stay with you since you have the floor. Thinking back over the past decade or so, what do you think the key accomplishments of the LELs has been during that time?
Oh my gosh, there's been several. I'd just like to highlight some of them that I've noticed. The law enforcement liaisons have helped to increase the professional competency of law enforcement personnel engaged in traffic law enforcement. And what I mean by that is the LELs have understood the importance of officers being clearly and carefully trained, and they've helped promote and facilitate law enforcement leadership to invest in training with their officers at SFSTs, ARIDE, DRE, case documentation, case preparation, and testimony. And professional competency is a critical element of providing equitable traffic law enforcement. It's one of those. The other accomplishment that I have seen is that the LELs have helped law enforcement leadership and officers understand the purpose of traffic law enforcement. I have attended a number of conferences where LELs have talked about how do law enforcement officers and agencies develop their professional discretion, where their enforcement decisions are based consistently on applied legal principles, the facts and circumstance of the incident, and not officers' opinions. And they've helped promote what I call procedural justice. I'm a big advocate of procedural justice training. And then I've seen a great increase in law enforcement liaisons helping law enforcement agencies maximize their community-oriented policing concepts and outreach to include minority communities, highway safety offices, partners. And as one LEL shared with me, he says there's no customers. Customers infer you have a choice. These are shareholders because they own their communities, and they're a shareholder with the professional police services. And, I thought that was very insightful. And then the last that I would like to highlight is the LELs have promoted the concept and facilitated the practice of intelligence-led policing, which is evidence-based enforcement. And that with community outreach and procedural justice training is kind of the three critical elements of doing traffic law enforcement that the public expects and accepts. And thank you again. And anything else that you would have that I would add, Daryl?
Yeah, I really like the idea of talking about people in the community as being shareholders. Safe communities don't happen without people participating and taking part, and shareholders, I think, captures that very nicely. Shelley opened up the webinar with, in his introductory comments, with a list of pretty daunting challenges that law enforcement faces going forward. Put your crystal ball in front of you for a second, and see if you can share with us what you see as some of the biggest opportunities for LELs going forward in the face of those challenges.
Sure. I'm always an optimistic person. And with any challenge, there's always an opportunity for uh, a solution, something positive. And I'll share a current challenge that right now in the area that I work is that there's a media narrative that law enforcement profession is overwhelmingly accentuating the errors of police officers. And the public image of the police is really complex, making generalizations very difficult. And I see an opportunity for the state highway safety offices with the assistance of the LELs to help change this narrative in being able to utilize their social media networks to show day in and day out officers are performing professional police services for their community. And I'll give you an example of what an opportunity that LELs would be able to help highway safety offices add an extra positive voice for the law enforcement profession. They could help highlight the officer behaviors to the highway safety office to share publicly is the professional competency of officers. It's a complex profession, and being able to share the professional competency of officers helps instill trust and confidence in the public that officers are making decisions based on the law and the self-interest of the person and the community. The other is being able to share with the public the courtesy, the respect that officers show to all members of their community. And then a tentativeness to crash victims. Yesterday we were having a conversation that crashes are violent. That's violence. And when you speak to a person that's been involved in a crash, they never forget the feeling of being scared, or their families, the fright that they had that their loved one was hurt. So being able to highlight the officer behavior that attentiveness to crash victims, and then also the responsiveness to traffic safety issues, that the reason that they're doing the enforcement is for a specific purpose to protect their friends, their families, and their children. And then the last that I think is really critical is highlighting the fairness of their decision making, that this is not based on their personal biases or opinion or a person's race or ethnicity or gender. This is based on their driving behavior and the priorities of protecting friends, families, and children's, and enforcing those life-saving laws like what I call the fatal five: impaired driving, speed, seatbelt enforcement, distracted and aggressive driving. So there's an opportunity there for LELs to highlight these officers' behaviors that will again show that this is meaningful work.
Thank you, Glenn. Katie, longtime instructor in the LEL program. Do you think that LELs would be willing to take more classes to build their skills to help them be more effective in their role of improving traffic enforcement?
I absolutely do. In every class that we teach, we always kind of have like a round table right at the end, and everyone gets to share what came out of the course. And we write everything down at the beginning of the course, their expectations, and making sure that we meet those expectations. Because sometimes we have LELs that come into the course that they're brand new and they have no idea what their job is. And so we separate many of the different responsibilities and everything that we do as a law enforcement liaison. There's a reason that Janice and I get partnered together to teach a certain portion of the class when it comes to roles and responsibilities. And that is because what they do in Florida is completely opposite of what we do here in Texas. And so, bringing all of that kind of to the table and letting everybody engage and share exactly what they do in their states, what we bring back from it is we learn from everybody and we take from everybody, and we say, wow, you guys are doing this over there. Let me see if I can incorporate it over here. One of the things that stood out in the last class that we taught, Janice and I just finished teaching in Kansas, and Dawn from Kansas, who is a brand new LEL, at the end of the course, he shared with everybody, and he said, what's next? When do we come back for more? And so he's actually looking for that opportunity to advance on it. And in many of the classes that we've taught, we have people coming back every couple of years, refresher. It's always great to come in and network with all of the LELs from different areas and learn the new things that are going on. Just like what Glenn said, our world is changing. It's evolving into a lot of differences, and we're able to kind of incorporate that into the training. And so, yes, most definitely, people are looking for more and seeing what else we can add and build to it.
So you think if you were able to develop refresher courses and even offer advanced courses, that LELs would take part in that?
I think 100% they would take part in it. It is always it's a great networking opportunity, and it's a great way to learn different things that other states are doing. And if I can come back to Texas and share with my boss and my team and say, hey, guess what they're doing over here? And I can give you a great example of, Janice utilizes constant contact, something that I'd heard of before, but never really looked into. And one of the things that she shared, this is how I do things, and this is how we kind of make really good use of our time by utilizing this. And all everyone has to do is share their contacts. And so, she shared that with me, and I immediately took it and ran with it. And I went, hey, guess what? This is what they're doing. So, again, when we go out and we teach these classes, we learn from others just as much as they are learning from us. It is just a great opportunity to share ideas.
In today's world, credentialing or certifications for training is for specific professions or specialties within professions has become a pretty common thing and expected in a lot of places. Do you think that would be helpful for the LEL program?
Yes, absolutely. With credentialing, we know what goes along with credentialing, whether it's, their increased competence, they have more confidence when going out into the field, having all of these abilities, professional recognition, that possible earning potential as well that goes along with any credentialing. And so being able to build on that and rather than just staying at one level and building those levels up, I think it's an excellent idea.
Great. Janice, also a longtime instructor. Can you tell us a little bit about what tools you think would be most important to enable LELs to provide detailed technical assistance for the agencies in their jurisdictions?
Man, Daryl, I love this question because cops love tools, and, working the road, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better you're going to be to execute your job. And I think that's the same thing as being an LEL, is the more tools you have, the better off you're going to be. Obviously we're very data driven. So access to localized data and analyst tools is a huge plus. Traffic enforcement software. I feel like the LEL should have great knowledge on their how their crashes are inputted, how they're uploaded, and how to access them. Communication and collaboration tools. Like Katie said, her and I talk frequently. We teach together often, and just having that great collaboration with other LELs is absolutely huge, whether it's a local LEL, one in our neighboring states, or one across the country. I think that's a massive tool to have. Training and resources. We are very fortunate here in Region 4 that we have an amazing working relationship with our fellow states. So shout out to all the Region 4 LELs that are on the webinar today. We have a Region 4 conference every year, and we rotate it every 5 years. It goes around through the state, and we learn so much from each other and our neighboring LELs. Just two two things that came out of these past LEL conferences that we had was we talked about phlebotomy and, roadside officers being able to do blood draws, and the upcoming digital driver's license. Who would have ever thought that we were in a stage where we'd be on the roadside showing digital driver's licenses? But you know what? It's here. It's now. Tennessee's got a program coming. I know Louisiana has it up and running, and we are in the process of developing it here in Florida as well. So without that collaboration and that knowledge, and sharing this information with our other states, how would we even know about that? How can we bring that to our states? How can we make our roadside more efficient? Another great tool would be GIS and mapping tools. What a great tool to walk into an agency and say, hey, sheriff, hey, chief, here's a map of where all your crashes are. Here's where all your problem locations are. And if so happens your crime overlaps with that, how about we enforce in that area even more? I think there was a great program for that at one point in time. Statistical analysis software, just being able to know where your data is, collect your data, and how to read your data. That kind of software needs to be a great tool for an LEL. Let's see, access, I made some notes here. Access to local legal experts. LELs, if you don't know your TSRPs, get to know them because they are a fabulous resource. Katie and I last week in Topeka had the honor of having 2 TSRPs in our class that we learned a lot from, and I hope that they got a lot from us. But we went into, how they communicate with the judges and how they make sheets. And, unfortunately, if we have an agency that's struggling with judges that are throwing their cases out and not hearing them, that's a negative for officers to go out and want to do traffic enforcement because they feel like, why are they doing it if these judges are just going to throw these cases out? So that was a big hot topic item last week in our class. And of course, as Glenn said, our shareholders, our community traffic. We have community traffic safety teams here in Florida, and the LELs are very active in it. I have 12 in my region, and so I put a lot of miles on my car, and I go to a lot of meetings, and I'm very involved with my local districts as well as all of my local government officials. So very, very fortunate here. So those are just a few of my highlight things that I feel like are great tools for an LEL toolbox.
Thanks, Janice. Katie or Glenn, do you have other ideas you think might be helpful?
Glenn, you're muted. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'll defer to you and then I'll follow up.
Well, I just have to, reiterate what Janice said. It's, learning from different people, learning all of the things. Our data is extremely important. We utilize that when we walk into an agency, and going back to what Glenn said, we struggle with issues now that not everyone wants to be involved in traffic safety, and for whatever reason, and there are numerous reasons that are out there. But when you're able to walk into an agency with those tools and say, well, I understand that, you don't want to do traffic safety. I understand you don't want to participate in the STEP program. Giving them those other options. I learned from Nevada that they have a wonderful joining forces program that they do out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to take money from the state, but they still participate. And I think that's fantastic. When you can walk in and say, I understand you don't want to do this, but this is the problem that you're having in your area. And you're actually able to show them, well, you had 8 fatalities in a 2-week period. We seem to have a problem here. And in Texas, unfortunately, like I said, we kind of have a different type of problem here in Texas, in that, our state troopers aren't in a lot of the areas anymore because they're all down in South Texas. And so that is an issue that comes up very, very often. And, when we hear sometimes from sheriff's departments that we don't do traffic, that's a trooper's job. I kind of respond, well, do you know where they are right now? Because they're not in your area, in case you haven't noticed. And so we bring a lot of that. Our data helps us a lot when we're able to walk into agencies and have that knowledge with us. So
thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to Janice and Katie. I've had the privilege of attending their classes as one of their students. And what I saw the value of those classes, and eventually the value of any LEL training recommendations that Johns Hopkins University recommends, is helping LELs to understand the importance of traffic safety and how it fits in the overall scheme of providing public safety for a community. And then helping with Katie and Janice, when they would visit in their classes, I saw it as a way of helping the students develop what I call their organizational sophistication. And what I mean by that is helping them develop the skill of navigating competing interests, promote cooperation, address conflict, and just get things done. And then influence. Leadership is influence. And the LELs do what I call small L leadership in the big leadership world. How do they help a group create a clear vision of where they can support the vital traffic safety mission, and then developing resources and accomplishing tasks to help shepherd projects to a completion? And Katie and Janice give examples of that are great resources. And that's why they probably have a Rolodex of many people that have gone to their classes and use them as a resource. And then finally, we were talking about it yesterday, focus on results. What does success look like? And they talk about, what does success look like? And I think that's important for highway safety offices and LELs, and specifically law enforcement agencies, and where they're struggling to reprioritize traffic law enforcement, is what does success look like? And the LELs can help critically define what success looks like with their highway safety offices and be able to share that to clarify expectations. So I think the training is invaluable, and I'm looking forward to seeing your work product.
Thank you, Glenn. I'd just like to revisit a question that Glenn has already provided his insight on, and that's what are the biggest opportunities for the profession going forward? And I'm sure that Janice and Katie have some thoughts on that as well, and it might be helpful to the LELs to hear that.
Yeah, working with, we're very fortunate here in Florida. We have a fantastic highway safety office, and the LELs work hand in hand, very close with our highway safety office. And our ultimate goal is zero. So however we can accomplish that, our target zero is our mission here in Florida. Yeah, will we ever see it? I mean, I certainly hope so. But, if I had that crystal ball, I would want to pick and choose, who's got the bigger and best programs. And the only way to do that is to network and collaborate and see what's working in one area versus what's not working in another area, and figure it out together. I mean, we're all on the same team here, and we gotta collaborate and get this done.
Katie?
Yeah, so as everybody who has been through the class probably already knows this, but the state of Texas, we do rank #1 in many of those categories when it comes to traffic-related fatalities and serious bodily injuries. Our goal, of course, and I've said it many times in our course, is that we're trying to reduce those numbers. And when we talk about success, we're all looking at the same goal. We're all looking at saving lives, and that is our purpose in what we do, in everything that we do. And whatever we can bring to the table to kind of help share, and this is why it's so important to get ideas, to get other things that other people are doing, because when it comes to the state of Texas, we haven't had a deathless day in almost 23 years. November 7th of the year 2000 was the last day that we didn't have somebody die on a roadway. And that right there should speak, so much to all of the people that we come across here in the state of Texas. We push that issue. And just like Janice said, we're striving for that zero. And if I can go into a classroom and say, oh my gosh, look what Glenn is doing over there in Washington. Let me see if I can bring that here. Maybe that'll help us get to that other deathless day that we are so desperately looking for here in Texas.
We propose that question in our LEL classes. Day one, it's what was your fatality number last year? And it's interesting with the newer LELs, how many of them don't really know that, or what their target is. Is it a percentage? Is it zero? What was your numbers last year? And that's something that's very important for them to know. If you're going to be encouraging these officers and promoting your traffic safety, you should know your numbers, you should know your data, you should know what your goals and your visions are.
Thank you. Just a reminder to our participants, you can ask questions, use the Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen and put your questions up. We'll get to them as when we can and handle as many as we can. We have one so far, and hopefully we'll see a few others pop up here shortly. If it were possible to establish an LEL Academy, something that may be aimed at beginning, intermediate, experienced LELs, have them for maybe a week period of time to focus on issues. What would you cover? What should beginners or well, actually each level? What kind of stands out as something that you think would be important for LELs to have to advance their skills?
Go ahead,
I'll
Janice. You're about
Thank
to jump
you.
out of your
I know.
seat. I know you are.
I love this idea so much of having different levels of an LEL Academy. You know, as Keith and I have been very fortunate to teach the law enforcement professional development course that we have currently. Communication is key. I mean, I think that is the foreground on how to get agencies involved, how to communicate your data, your research. And then as we get to know all the LELs in the country, it's very different roles. What Katie does in Texas is very different what I do in Florida, and the rules and regulations that we have to go by, and learning all of this. You know, program management is huge. And so as you know, an LEL in Florida, it might not be so heavily based on program management as it is out in Texas. Katie needs to know everything to know about program management, where in Florida, it's more how do I get officer engagement and how do I get agency buy-in is a big struggle for me. So I think that on a very first line basis, it's officer engagement, agency buy-in, communication, and then as you go up, data and research, and then obviously program management after that, just depending on how many different levels and stages. But I think it's important day one that we touch base on everything and what all of our roles and responsibilities are as LELs.
Yeah, and I completely agree with all of that. Knowing that if you start at a first level, you get that understanding of what other states are doing, because we just don't know that yet. And so when they start at the beginning as a beginning LEL, we get to get that knowledge. Okay, what are you guys doing out here? One of the big things that we focus on here in Texas is a lot of training. And, you know, anybody who has taken the class knows that Janice stands up there when I teach officer safety just to keep me in line, because I can go on forever and ever about officer safety. But you know, we talk about officer safety because, again, it ties into everything that Glenn started this entire conversation about when it comes to, you know, our law enforcement and what's happening. You know, us calling the A word, it's violence. You know, we've changed that to collision here in the state of Texas just recently in our transportation code. We don't like to say the word accident. It's not a good word. So, you know, making sure that we build on all of those aspects, of course, is extremely important. But going back to relationship building and partnerships, how do we keep them? Not only do we need to know how do we get them, we also need to know how to keep them on board with our message. Media, you guys talked about media earlier. It's extremely important to get that message out there to the media. It's extremely important for us to embed ourselves with community leaders. You know, I'm headed to a leadership conference tomorrow for the Hispanic community here in Houston. And, you know, and I look forward to meeting all of these community leaders if I don't already know them, because I want to make sure that they see me and they remember me. Oh, there's that traffic safety lady. There's that traffic safety lady. And that is exactly what we go out there and we strive to do. We want to build our partnerships. We want to maintain them as much as we possibly can. And of course, you know, falling into what are those reasons? How do we keep our law enforcement engaged? It's just kind of a combination. So is there room for this law enforcement? Janice and I both jumped out of our seat when we heard that idea. We were like, whoa, yay. This is wonderful, because it gives us that opportunity to expand on what we are already currently doing. And that, I think, is extremely important.
Thanks, Katie. Glenn, thoughts?
Yes, I'd like to, I like the concept of your LEL Academy. And I'll go back to helping to develop a sense of sophistication. And part of that sophistication for an LEL is knowledge and understanding of community outreach, which is a critical element of equitable traffic law enforcement. I've done a number of assessments of community outreach programs throughout the United States. And what I have seen is that most community outreach is where the law enforcement agency is informing the public. But there's three purposes for community outreach. There's informing, consulting, and involving. And LELs understanding the sophistication that when you're doing community outreach, what's the purpose? Are you looking to involve them? Are you looking to consult with them? Or are you looking to inform them? And all the time, it might be all three. But again, going back to the shareholder concept that an LEL taught me was that we need to understand better community outreach and the purposes, specifically when it comes to addressing minority communities. And then the LELs are representing highway safety offices and going back to understanding the importance of traffic safety is understanding that process, learning more about the state's strategic highway safety plans, their triennial highway safety plans, and the grant application process. I think that's very important for LELs to understand that so that they can do that small L leadership in the big leadership world. And I'll go again back to Katie and Janice in their class. They talk about that, but I think there could be an enhancement of more detailed information because the LELs are the subject matter experts, and I like the concept, and it's something that I think should always be evaluated and polished. How do we get better?
Thanks, Glenn. Just a reminder to the participants that you can ask questions. You can also use the question area as a way to make comments. Maybe something that one of the panel members has said that you agree with, or you are not certain about, or your ideas relative to the questions that we've asked the panel members. You might want to share that on the Q&A area as well. Let's talk a little bit about local agencies being receptive to outreach from an LEL. What kind of things do you think they would be receptive to? Maybe an LEL helping identify traffic problems, doing some analysis that helps identify those problems, or helping them think about what the most effective tactics might be for addressing the issues, or even working with the community. Have you found that agencies are receptive to LELs playing those kind of roles, or is that something that needs to be developed?
I personally think that the LEL is huge in that role, especially with smaller agencies. You know, that a chief or, you know, your first line supervisors have no idea on how to go about doing a traffic event, or, you know, getting out there into the community, or really what their numbers are. I had one situation where I was, you know, fortunate that I got a foot in the door with a sergeant, first line supervisor. I was there with our highway safety matrix that has all the cities that are listed and organized by their emphasis areas on how bad they are in their crashes or how good they're doing in a particular area. And this one agency was top 25 in the state across the board and everything, in every high emphasis crash area. And the chief just happened to be walking by, and I told him who I was, why I was there, told him how his city ranked. And he literally looked at me and says, "You mean we're top 25? Is that good?" I'm like, "No, chief, that's bad." He goes, "Help my guys fix it." And literally that was my foot in the door. That agency now has 4 different grants that I've helped them facilitate, and their traffic unit.
Conversations turn out to be really important at times.
It really does. It's you never know just where a conversation is going to go. But, you know, the fact that I'm there, I'm a wealth of knowledge. I had data to provide, and I had somebody that was willing to listen to help make their community better.
Then Katie, thoughts?
Well, I think that, you know, just the mere fact that we have law enforcement background as LELs, that is a requirement for our job, is that we have to have that experience. We have to have that knowledge, and we have to be able to speak that language. And I think that by speaking that language, it is definitely something that they look at as, oh, they're not just a civilian. They obviously know, and they've incorporated them, you know, themselves into the traffic safety world, you know, by doing this particular job. And so, you know, looking at, hey, what's a law enforcement liaison? Well, I can tell you there's a lot of people in the state of Texas that know what a law enforcement liaison is. We are not civilians that work for the DOT office. We may work under a grant, but we have a wealth of knowledge. We have data at our fingertips. We have, you know, just ideas that we can share with them. And, you know, here in Texas, of course, you know, again, different in every state, but we have a lot of free training, and our training, I put up against a whole lot. We have some of the most, you know, fantastic instructors here in the state of Texas. And, you know, a lot of what we bring to them, you know, from step 101 to officer safety. You know, my coworker did a presentation this morning that was exactly everything that we spoke about yesterday, and Glenn speaking out about procedural justice and equity, and how we get law enforcement to engage and to understand the problems that we're having. And so being able to provide that to these officers, or to, you know, their supervisors or command staff, whoever it is, to be able to say, hey, this is what we have for you, and this is why we do it, but here it is, and it's free. And, you know, anything that's free in law enforcement is always a plus. And so when we're able to provide anything that is free and they can get credit for, it's like your post credit. We have TCOL credit here in Texas, and, you know, we're able to provide them that credit in addition to doing everything for them as far as the reporting and everything else. So I think being able to walk in with those tools is very, very helpful when it comes to our positions here in Texas.
Ben?
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to understanding, and again, I'll use that word, organizational sophistication, having some savvy. And I'll give you an example. In the Pacific Northwest, 91% of the law enforcement agencies are what meet the definition of IACP's definition of a small agency. And a majority of the Western United States is rural and small police communities. And an example is in Eastern Idaho, there was an LEL who was advocating for a local sheriff to be involved in a multi-jurisdictional impaired driving enforcement in his county. And his county commissioner said, why would we do this with other agencies? And the sheriff, through the LEL, had said, you know, we don't want the first time that we work with another agency to be when there's a disaster. This is an opportunity for us to practice our memorandum of understandings, our interagencies agreements, and do it with the help of funding from the Highway Safety Office to help perfect these relationships and partnerships. And they had 13 agencies participate. And what I learned from that is that all law enforcement agencies know it's the right thing to do, traffic law enforcement, but some may not have the political will. LELs need to appeal to the self-interest of that jurisdiction, and it could be through practicing your interagency agreements, or what is it that the community is expecting. And the community expects that the police services are going to protect their friends, their families, their children, and enhance their quality of life. So being able to always appeal to the self-interest of that agency and knowing and understanding the community is very important. I'll go back to what Katie and Janice said, but LELs, again, having that sophistication, and it's one thing to know, but it's better to understand.
Let me ask you to share some of your techniques or approaches on how you and maybe others that you've watched or know have learned from over the years. How do you get the attention of those agencies that maybe are not currently making traffic enforcement a priority? What kind of techniques, what's your experience taught you? And other than corralling the chief in the hallway, what else might work?
So in
Anyone?
Florida, we have this great resource that's called a quick reference guide. And what we've done here in Florida is we've basically condensed our state statute book that just has our traffic statutes in it. It definitely has some graphics that go into your car seats. It goes into micromobilities, bicycles, motorcycles, what you should have on certain levels. And police officers that see this are like, man, where can I get that from? Well, you know what? Every LEL has a trunk full of them. Call your local LEL and we'll get them to you. And that sparks interest because officers will read this little quick reference guide and they'll go, oh, I didn't know that was a statute. I didn't know you had to have a helmet for this. I didn't know you had to have a driver's license for that. And then that encourages people to go out there and maybe push the envelope for statutes that they didn't know before and get a little bit more buy-in from them. And that's something that the LEL team has developed.
We put the child passenger safety laws inside of a pocket notebook because every officer needs a pocket notebook. And the moment they flip it open, it may be a little small to read, but the younger generation can probably read them without putting on their glasses, unlike us. But you know, a lot of people don't know the rules when it comes to occupant protection in children. And so just having that quick reference, you know, and they just flip open and go, oh, wait, you know, this is a thing, 8 years old, 4'9", and, you know, so it's educating them in addition to giving them a tool that they can actually go out and utilize. And so, you know, again, it's just having all of the availability. I opened up my trunk just yesterday and said, hey, you need some more notebooks, and handed them to one of the captains, you know, over here in Houston. And, you know, she's happy to give them to her troops so that they can open them up and see them as well.
Yeah, so, some of the techniques that I've seen, again, going back to the LELs working behind the scenes of no ego. I work with some regional LEL programs that every one of the LELs have no ego. They work behind the scenes to help those agencies be successful, to where the sheriff, the police chief, or the command staff do not feel threatened by the LEL. And again, going back to that selflessness of that service of truly trying to help that law enforcement agency serve and provide professional police services to their communities. An example is LELs, some agencies that participate in maybe a mobilization may only have 3 officers in the agency. So the LEL behind the scenes will do all the paperwork, maybe even do the grant application, do the data collection, but do it all behind the scenes with no attention to themselves, just to have that agency participate. And that builds trust, that builds confidence, that builds that relationship with those law enforcement and those chiefs. And then the chief tells his colleague, or the sheriff tells their colleague, yes, this was a positive experience, and let me share with you. So word of mouth, I have seen specifically, and I'll highlight a couple of states, Idaho and Washington, where this has happened. Again, those LELs working behind the scenes selflessly, and again, appealing to the self-interest of that agency because they really understand that community and what is that's important.
Others?
to agree with that one. You know, we do whatever it takes to get these guys taken care of. They are our law enforcement. I mean, they are very important to us. You know, one of my selling points when I go out and I recruit for, you know, participation with our programs, it's a lot of, you know, well, I don't know how to build a grant. Well, that's okay, because you tell me when to show up. I will be at your agency. I will tell you what buttons to push and what numbers to put in there. And, you know, I'm not touching the buttons, you are, but I'm going to sit right next to you and I'm going to walk you through, holding your hand if I need to. And that is extremely helpful. The mere fact that, you know, our positions allow us to be very flexible with our time. You know, I've taught classes at 10 o'clock at night. I've taught classes at 5 o'clock in the morning, as well as my coworkers. We do whatever it takes to take care of our law enforcement, and they appreciate that. And I think that's another thing that's extremely important is, you know, we don't have to be appreciated, but, you know, we are going to bend over backwards just to help them out in any way that we can.
We have a question from one of our participants, and Glenn has touched on this a little bit, but the question is, has any members of the panel conducted outreach to local government officials, understanding their role in budgeting and helping establish priorities, promoting have the LELs have that kind of role as well, and any experience that you've had in that area?
So upon request, I'm sorry, Glenn,
No, glad.
upon request, yes, here in Florida, we will. I have presented to a couple county commissioners and city commissioners on their traffic safety and where they're at and what their agencies within their jurisdictions are doing with that traffic safety. And I did it one time about 4 years ago, and now I get the request to do it twice a year. And basically just where they're at, what they're doing, and they just want an outside view of what is going on within their jurisdiction. So that's something that I provide for them.
To me, it's a kudos when we're able to go to the government officials and go, hey, look at the great job your agency is doing. I love to give recognition to law enforcement that's doing a fantastic job, whether it be the chief or a first line officer. You know, if they're doing a great job, I want other people to know it, whether it's, you know, the city commissioner or county commissioner or, you know, anybody at that level, because it's important to show them that they're really, really out there trying to get those numbers down in their area.
Agreed.
Yes, and I'll give you an example, Daryl. In Washington State, there's a county, Chelan County, which is in the central part of the state. They asked me, the sheriff did, to provide a presentation to the county commissioners on trends that traffic safety trends in their county that would have an adverse impact on the quality of life of the people that live in that county. And part of problem identification is identifying the not only the scope but the magnitude. And the commissioners saw, yes, there's a issue right now, but it's going to grow because the population of that county was increasingly getting younger and younger. And when populations become younger, they're going to have more traffic safety issues. And we were able to share that, and then also share what is the societal cost of a fatality crash in their county, a serious injury crash, a property damage crash, and this is actual dollars, and the health safety in the county. So yes, and I've helped some LELs in other parts of the region on how to be able to educate their political jurisdictions on the importance of interpreting the data and then being able to make traffic safety investments that have a positive influence, and then how to measure that. What kind of performance indicators do you use to help measure that, to provide progress information back to the council members for them to either to make adjustments or that, yes, we're on the right track, but we still need to keep moving forward.
Thanks, Glenn. Janice got a question to you about being able to share the brochure that you mentioned.
Absolutely. As we collaborate and we have resources, I'll give a shameless plug out there, www.floridalel.info. floridalel.info. On the left side of your screen, you will have a resource tab. If you click the resource tab, all of our resources are there, including our quick reference guide, and you can download it into a PDF form.
Daryl?
Sure.
I received one. Kind of in following up the positive things Glenn was just saying for all the panelists. Question is, what are the primary obstacles that you have, as LELs have experienced in trying to get the job done?
I'll start in. I would think the primary obstacle, and again, I'll always go back, it's not it may be a challenge, but there's an opportunity, is mindset. A mindset develops into a culture. And in order to change culture, you need to change the mindset. And being able to change the mindset that traffic safety is public safety. And going back to, I champion the LELs in the states in the Pacific Northwest, is when they are visiting with sheriffs, police chiefs, traffic safety advocates, they're constantly talking about how traffic safety is public safety that helps improve the quality of life, protecting their friends, families, and children, enhancing economic vitality, instilling trust in government, helping to educate children. Those are all things that the public expects from their government entities. And so the biggest challenge has been mindset and being patient and have that regular cadence of information with specific examples of a mindset that's different that helps change that traffic safety culture. And I'll be quiet and defer to Katie and Janice, but I could talk about that for all day.
And Glenn, we could listen to you all day. Glenn keeps talking about how he's a fan of ours, but we all know we're a fan of yours, and we really could listen to you all day. I go to, he hit on one really good point, and a challenge is getting people to understand how it could personally affect them if it hasn't already, and looking at it, and I say that right now, and I know I seem a little distracted, and it's because my phone is blowing up. My mother was just involved in a crash here in Houston, hit from behind, and so I'm kind of monitoring all of this at the same time that I am paying attention, but again, ironically, we're talking about our traffic safety, and getting people involved. And unfortunately, we all know, especially when it comes to the top level government, oftentimes, it's not a priority for them until something personal happens to them and they are affected in one way or another. And that is one thing that we have to continue to bring home. I have a captain out here in the Houston area that has watched over the past year and a half, a widow of a fallen officer who was hit by a drunk driver last year, watches her on Facebook in the grieving process. And he told me one day, he said, Katie, I look at her and all I can envision is my wife. I don't want anything like that to ever happen to my wife. He's out there working and doing his job, and he's hit by a drunk driver. And now look what she has to go through. And I don't want that to happen. And that is his reasoning. A portion of his reasoning for going out and continuing to just, go full force into, enforcing DWIs and participating with our programs. Because he feels that, hey, that could be me. That could be my wife dealing with situations like that. So, Go ahead, Janice. I know you're dying to speak.
No, I just say monopolize on the why. We posed this question last week in Topeka's, why are we doing this? We go into public safety for one reason or another, but it's to save lives at the end of the day. And so if we can appeal to those officers to get out there and do their job, and if the public has something that's gone on in their life, then to jump on that and make an example and to show people. And if we can just save one life, I mean, that when I worked the road, if I put a drunk in jail at that night, that was my philosophy was, listen, I might lose the case at the end of the day, but that's not my goal right now. My goal right now is to remove an impaired driver from the roadway to save a life that night. And that's what we need to focus on, is saving lives.
There's lots of issues and challenges, personnel shortages, concern about police bias, increasing demands for service that agencies are facing. And obviously, LELs can't solve those. But do you feel like that they can help agencies work through those issues? And if so, how could they help?
Yeah, we are in this era of do more with less, unfortunately. And I feel poor agencies, I think a recruiter is the most awful job to have right now at an agency, because how do you get these kids to come out for, I don't know, 30, 40, whatever the starting salary is now, to deal with the backlash and the bias and everything else that they're facing right now. I like to bring examples of proactively encouraging agencies and officers to do their job. I have one agency, for example. I love this example. During Click It or Ticket, if he has officers that go out there and they commit to doing enforcement for occupant protection, and they happen to, write a seatbelt ticket, then that officer gets to not shave for the next month. So for me as an LEL walking into that department, I can actually see, hey, thank you for participating in Click It or Ticket. I know that you wrote a seatbelt ticket last week because you're not clean shaven. So that's just one example that it doesn't cost the agency anything. It gets a little, selfless promotion for the officer, and it's a good little local competition with the officers.
Good. Other thoughts?
I love that idea. Janice talked about it in our last class, and I went, well, that's very creative, because believe it or not, something that little can go a long way. And, people will look at that and go, well, just like she said, it doesn't cost anything. It's just an extra incentive, whether it be a day off or, hey, you get to show your tattoos tomorrow or your beard today. And I mean, they're little things and they don't cost anything. And that's extremely important, because unfortunately budget is not something that is continuing to increase right now.
Yeah. And law enforcement liaisons in the Western United States deal with a lot of small community policing and rural policing. And I look at the LELs that they're knowledge brokers. They have a vast array of relationships and communication channels and connections. And I find that a lot of chiefs of police and sheriffs from small agencies use the LELs as a sounding board. Hey, do you know somebody that does this? And they're great at facilitating that and putting them in contact with other people to help that sheriff or that police chief. And sometimes it has nothing to deal with traffic safety. It may be public safety. It may be a jail issue, but it again adds to the value of that LEL as a resource. And then as far as motivation, I have never met the sheriff of Washington County in Oregon, but I learned from the Oregon Highway Safety Office that when his deputies participate in a mobilization, he writes a letter to their significant other, thanking that person for their support of their wife or their husband or their significant other for the contribution that they're making. And he sends it to the house. And when that spouse or significant other gets that letter and says, oh my gosh, he understands the importance of home support. And when I heard that, I stole the idea and shared it with Montana, who was looking to do something like that. So, the LELs are great resources for information, and I call them knowledge brokers. And yes, they definitely can help.
I love that, Glenn, so much. So one of the portions that Katie and I teach together in the professional development class is partnership and stakeholders. And we go over this entire laundry list of who are your partners and who are your stakeholders. And we've recently incorporated an activity where we separate the class into groups and we go, okay, you have an occupant protection detail, you have a distracted driving detail, you have a DUI detail. Who are your partnerships and who are your stakeholders? Who are you going to partner with to successfully do this detail that we have going on? And we've never had a spouse come up on that list. So that we're going to add to the list for next time.
Well,
great.
That's courtesy of the Washington County Sheriff in Oregon.
We will make sure to give them credit.
I think it's a fantastic idea, and I guarantee you by the next mobilization, the sheriff in Harris County will be sending those same letters, because all it takes is me picking up the phone and calling and saying, hey, I got this great idea. And, and he's all about, I love it, let's do it. And, so I think that's fantastic. I think
Katie, I'll send you a copy of the letter, and if you would like it, Janice, I'll send it to you.
Love it. But we go through this whole long list because it's people that you don't even think of. I mean, have you partnered with your share ride services? Have you partnered with your bars and restaurants? Have you partnered with your sports teams that are in your area? Have you partnered with, your public works department?
We can't forget the TSRP.
Your TSRP.
And I'm just going to say, bless his heart, he was left out, and he sat back and he waited and he waited and he waited, and he goes, I'm just going to say, what about the TSRP? And I mean, he was a little forgotten, but it was really good that he brought that up, and because it led to more examples. And one of the examples that I gave was oral fluids. Chris Kirby gives a fantastic presentation out there in Indiana on oral fluids.
Yes.
And when I saw his presentation, my first thought was, ooh, I want this in Texas. And so, but me being in the position that I am, I'm not going to do anything without talking to my TSRP. And so, of course, I pick up the phone, I call him, I say, hey, this is what I learned at this conference. Tell me what your thoughts are. And, lo and behold, he gave me his input, and it kind of kicked me back a little bit and said, oh, okay, I better watch out. But, was it Connecticut, I think, that gave a really good example in that he went out, he purchased a lot of these Cytoxin and oral fluid testing, got this grant, and then his TSRP was like, what are you doing? And he even said it in the class. He goes, I felt this big. But it all goes back to, well, you got to have that communication. You got to figure out, is this best for my state right now, or is there something else? And so, two great examples right there of communicating, not communicating. And, and he was just, so now he's got a bunch of these nice little machines that he's not able to utilize. If anybody's looking, I can give you his number, but.
Well, Katie, I would also like to compliment Chris Kirby, and you brought up a good point. I've never met Chris personally, but I've exchanged emails and talked to him on the phone. And what I've always really valued is his responsiveness. If you send an email or phone call, you can guarantee there will be a return. And that's a lesson to LELs, is that responsiveness of responding to emails and LELs. That invokes confidence that you're a resource and that you can be counted on. And that's very important with sheriffs and police chiefs. And Chris is a great example. And I believe he's going to be involved in a legislative work session in Washington State on oral swab testing in Indiana. So thank you for bringing that up, Katie.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Shelley? You're on mute, Shelley.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions for you that tie into what you've just talked about. Janice talking about the partnerships and everything. So I'll try and put them together. How do we make people internally, externally, and politically aware of the LEL's role and their potential? And the second part of that is, how do we brand the LELs nationally?
How do we brand the LELs nationally?
As a profession.
As a profession. Oh man, I think this great credibility that we're going for an LEL Academy is a fantastic start to getting that done. As far as making people aware, I cannot put enough emphasis on FaceTime. Get out there and you meet your agencies and you knock and you talk. The pandemic hit us and, Zoom was great, but there's something to be said when I'm in front of a sheriff or a city chief or whoever, and I'm telling them all the great things that we're doing. And then I'm bragging about one agency, and all the great things they're doing in their city. And I have another agency going, wait a minute, we want to do that in this city. And I go, okay, well, who can you partner with that's here to make this happen? And great examples, Katie and I talk about this a lot. We steal from a lot of other states and a lot of other agencies because there's some fantastic ideas that are going on out there in the country. And if we don't network and if we don't talk to each other, there's no way that we can know about this. So we've got to get together. We've got to communicate. You have to get out there and knock and talk to your people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Putting your face out there, having people know who you are and what you do is extremely important. And I think I gave this example in the last class is that, I go to Washington, D.C. every year for Police Week. That is what's considered my vacation every year because I do feel it's extremely important to honor our fallen and remember our fallen. But this past year, I am walking from the Capitol. I'm in full uniform. Nobody ever sees me in uniform because as an LEL, we don't wear our uniforms, obviously. But I'm in full uniform, cowboy hat and all, and I'm walking down and all of a sudden I hear somebody scream like, hey, step lady. I'm going, what? And of course I recognize, the step. And I turn around and, it's a guy from a Texas agency that said, I could not remember your last name, but I know you're the step woman. You're the one that comes and does all the step and recruits and, and here we are in Washington, D.C. And so, believe it or not, that actually happens pretty often. Just going in, I was in Janice's in Florida and, one of the guys from MPH was just like, hey, Katie. And I'm looking around going like, who is he talking to? Oh, he's talking to me. But, getting your face out there, getting known, letting them know what your position is and what you can do to help them is of greatest importance, of course.
Yeah, I'd like to recommend that specifically for branding of the LELs is value.
Mm-hmm.
And what value does the LEL provide? And their quality of character, who they are, the relationships of what they know, the knowledge of what they know, their intuition is what they feel, their experience, where they've been, their past successes, what they've done, and their ability of what they can do. That is value. And being able to leverage that value, the highway safety offices to get things done is, I think, paramount. And I would brand the LEL as value.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Shelley, any more questions come in? You're on mute.
Yes, give me 1 second.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I think we've got time for one more.
Just when I'm reading through some, some of the parallel, I'm going to put them together. This comes back again to the branding of the LELs nationally. If you could highlight, coming back to Glenn's point about value, if you could highlight 2 or 3 of the top characteristics of LELs and their importance to advancing traffic safety, what would those things be that you would highlight?
Great question.
So in Florida, I could literally get onto my email system and within 5 minutes, I would have whatever traffic safety message I wanted out to the entire state, every single agency within minutes, the same message for everybody. And there's not a lot of people that could do that. There's not a lot of people that have that kind of system developed in place that they have that. I have a great team. We have 8 LELs in the state. We have 7 LELs and a coordinator, and we've each have developed this list of contacts, and literally within minutes, we could have the same message everywhere in the state. And I think that right there is valuable, whether it's an enforcement way of a training, emergency mode, or whatever our message is, to be able to communicate that at a push of a button with everybody in the state is invaluable.
I agree. I've got mine started already. I can push a button and get to all of my agencies in my districts, which I cover 5 of them here in Texas. But networking is one of the things that I would say is the most important, being able to get out there and just talk to anybody. And I know that sometimes we call it an elevator speech. You got to have a great elevator speech. When somebody asks you, what do you do? I can go on forever. Just like I can with officer safety. Yes, Janice. But, when we have that great elevator speech and it doesn't matter who you're talking to, whether it be, community members or law enforcement, you let them know what you do. And it's like, can I have your card, please? Because they automatically want to connect with you. They want to be able to partner with you in all of the things that we have going on. And so I think it's extremely important to be able to maintain and gather those relationships and be that link to a lot of people around.
Yeah, I think Shelley, you had asked also about what are the qualities of a LEL?
Yes.
Okay, the qualities of the LELs that I have worked with and admire is initiative. They have high intentions, they have sincere effort, and they make things happen. And then the other is knowledge. They are knowledge brokers, but they're always sponges. Even though they may have been an LEL, they're still seeking out resources to help their knowledge. And then their energy is contagious. They are the energy source. And then the last is they have a great attitude. They view things in the positive. Yes, there are challenges, but the LELs that I've always worked with that I admire is they see every challenge as an opportunity and attack it with their initiative. So initiative, knowledge, energy, and attitude are the things that really stand out for an LEL.
That's great. Thank you. Before we turn it over to Shelley to close out, any final comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with LELs? Maybe something that we didn't ask questions about, or just any final thoughts? Katie?
Well, I would just like to thank everybody for joining us today, and hopefully you guys are sending in some responses as far as any ideas that you have, because again, this is not just about us coming up here and talking. We want to hear what you guys have to say and your input as well. But really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and just keep doing what we're doing. We've got to keep pushing along, and the ultimate goal, of course, is saving lives, and we've got to continue doing what we do.
Lynn?
To all you LELs, thank you for what you do. What you do is very meaningful and appreciated. And those that I've worked with, you've helped to elevate my work performance. And that gives me a sense of self-satisfaction working with high performers that have high standards. And thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say thank you. I'm very excited that the future of the LEL program is bright. Excited that this partnership that NHTSA has with Johns Hopkins and all the feedback that you guys are gathering to give to NHTSA. So I encourage all the LELs that are out there on this webinar, if you have any feedback, if you have any ideas, if you guys have sat through our professional development class and you loved it or you hated it, or you have some constructive criticism or some great ideas, please share it with me, Katie, Johns Hopkins, NHTSA, your highway safety reps, whoever you want to share it with. The LEL program is bright, and we're excited to be a part of its future.
My thanks to all of you for joining us today. I hope that this hour and a half has been something that you found very worthwhile and helpful to you in your work. Shelley?
I echo Daryl's comments, thanking everyone in the audience, and I especially thank our 3 panelists for being here today, sharing your thoughts on the LEL program and what you do, and how we can advance traffic safety and enforcement in our country. As we said in the beginning, this is the first of a series of panels, webinar panels with LELs. We didn't expect to solve all the problems or push forward all the ideas in one 90-minute session. So we're just at the beginning. We'll do some things that hopefully will help NHTSA advance short-term initiatives as well as long-term initiatives as we go through these webinars and collect input. I want to emphasize again that we're still at the stage where we're collecting ideas, thoughts, perceptions, whatever you can give us. And we'll put them together over time, do some research, do some testing, get more ideas, and put forward recommendations. Everyone's ideas are important, and we need them. Lots continue to go on. NHTSA recently sent out dates for 5 more courses to be offered through TSI over the coming months. So check your emails for a note from Charlie Files at NHTSA. Participate in the courses. Get information to us. Sign up for the next webinar and the one after that and the one after that. And we look forward to this effort continuing for a long time. And we look forward mostly to some great outcomes. Thank you very much.